What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Movie Worm. Now, I'm sorry this video is a little bit late. I had a lot of problems with my microphone and stuff. I finally got it working now. And I did finally go to record this on bonfire night. And then I kind of sat down and went, oh yeah, then fireworks are going to take over the video. So finally getting here now to record this damn thing. So I do apologize. This is a little bit late, but better late than never, I suppose. And this is just a video where I go over everything I watched in the month of October 2023. So let's just get into it now with the first thing that I watched. And the first thing that I watched is Saw X. Now, this is probably one of the most surprising movies of the year for me, because I kind of didn't expect much going into it. I thought, how many things can they do now with this Saw franchise? And this takes place between Saw and Saw 2. And we see John Kramer sort of getting revenge on the worst kind of people in the world. Like, I knew this movie wanted you to latch on to John Kramer. And I said to myself, I'm not going to let that happen, because I know what this guy is capable of in future movies, how murderous he becomes and stuff. And my God, I couldn't help it. It was like trying to fight sleep. I just had to get on his side in this movie, because these people he's putting in these traps in this film are just the most vile, despicable human beings you could ever think of. They are the lowest of the low. But what I liked about this film, there's a huge little story involved here. Like, the movie takes its time for the first hour. We're not just thrown into traps here and there. The movie has a lot of build up. And we really do see what Tobin Bell's character, John Kramer, was kind of going through before he came, before he came this big jigsaw murderer, really. And, you know, you kind of do feel for the guy. And then the second half of the movie, we just see the traps and stuff. Now, what I liked about this was the anticipation. We kind of knew that was all coming, so the build-up totally worked. And this has got to be probably the best Saw movie since 1 and 2. I would probably put this in third place if I was ranking all the Saw films. I had such a good time with it. My biggest problem is the ending, because something I was expecting to happen didn't. However, I do think that's going to be setting it up for another movie that might take place between Saw 1 and 2. So I will definitely be on board for that as well. Some of the traps here were awesome. Some of them, they did feel a little bit unfair at times. Like, characters were doing all the hard work and then kind of had to wait and hope for something else to happen. That was a little bit of a gripe. But overall, I had a fun time with Saw X, and it was way better than I thought it'd be. So that is Saw X. Next up, we have Night of the Creeps, an 80s horror movie that I'd never seen. I say horror, it's more of a horror comedy. Andy from Forgotten World of Movies was singing the praises of this film, and decided to pick it up on Blu-ray and check it out. And it follows these likable two characters, you know, these two friends who are just basically in high school and stuff. And the high school sort of gets infested with these little sort of alien type insect things, like these parasites, and that turns people into zombies, basically. And the movie is just full on 80s cheese. You know, it's got 80s vibes all the way through it. The makeup design on the zombies is awesome. You know, it's not just all bad CGI or anything that we usually get today. You know, there's care and effort put into the makeup design and stuff. Tom Atkins having the time of his life in here. You know, it's just a fun movie, really. I mean, I love the tagline on this. Good news, your date's here. The bad news is he's dead. As soon as I seen that, I went, yeah, okay, I'm going to give this a go. Yeah, it's just a typical 80s movie that just brings all the fun. And I had a good time with this. I'm glad to own it on Blu-ray. So that is Night of the Creeps. Next up, we have The Exorcist Beginning. Now, I was going through all the Exorcist movies before we got to The Exorcist Believer, which will be coming up in a minute. Now, over on my horror channel, I've ranked the entire Exorcist franchise, so I'll leave the link down below if you want to check that out. But The Exorcist Beginning is on the lower end of that spectrum, really, that ranking video. There's a long story going into this and The Exis Dominion, which I do explain in that ranking video. But basically, they made two films and released one in 2004, I believe, and one in 2005. I think that's the years. I'll get on to Dominion in a minute. This is a prequel following Father Merrin when he was in Africa, and he has to deal with this sort of demonic force that is in this church, and they've buried the church under the sand, and he has to go and investigate that church, but then this releases this evil presence, and it also, that evil presence came from this big battle that happened hundreds of years earlier in the same location, and there's like a war sort of conflict going on between the African villages and the British Empire, and that plays a lot into the film. It's an interesting type of concept, but this movie, yeah, it just wasn't doing it for me. It kind of felt dull and boring. And the third act, the makeup design and stuff, was just nowhere near as good as it was in the 1973 film. How that is possible, I don't know. So, for me, this is a movie I don't really ever want to return to. It was just, yeah. It's better than Exorcist 2, The Heretic. I'll say that. So that is The Exorcist Beginning. Next up, we have The Exorcist Dominion, which is the same story. They just had a lot of footage and decided to release this one because the other one didn't do too well. This is Paul Schrader's version, I believe. And this one is just a more dull and boring version of The Exorcist Beginning. It focuses a lot more on the conflict between the African villages and the British Empire, which for me, I don't go to an Exorcist movie for that. There's some very weird looking CGI hyenas in these two movies. I would say the third act played out a little bit better than The Exorcist Beginning, but it was a bit of a slog to get there, and I just didn't enjoy this film at all, really. So both of these movies are a dud. But again, it's better than The Exorcist 2, The Heretic. So that's The Exorcist Dominion. Next up, we have Totally Killer, which released on Amazon Prime. Now, this is a really fun movie that follows a same concept as Back to the Future, with a slasher subgenre vibe thrown in there. So basically, this killer was going around in the 80s, and he killed 3 people and was never seen again since. And 35 years later, he started this killing spree again. So our main protagonist decides, well, she doesn't decide, she accidentally goes back to the 80s, and then she wants to stop this killer from killing these girls and then eventually killing your mother in the future. And I had a really fun time with this. This was such an entertaining movie with so many fun vibes thrown in. Like, I like the way it used the Back to the Future concept as well. And she's going around going, "Have you seen the movie Back to the Future? That's me. I'm in that movie." It's got some fun dialogue in there. Like, I was laughing my ass off at some of the quotes that were coming out in this film. It does become a little bit predictable. I mean, I seen half the ending coming, and then I kind of didn't see something else, which was quite clever, but the other half was very predictable. But for me, this was just a really entertaining time. Me and my wife absolutely had a blast with this film, and it's going to be catered to a certain audience. If you're not fans of Happy Death Day or Freaky or The Babysitter, Killer Queen, this movie probably isn't going to be for you. But for me, it totally worked. So that is Totally Killer. Next up, we have The Exorcist Believer, and unfortunately, this was a huge disappointment. And I say huge disappointment, but was I really looking forward to this anyway? When I seen Ellen Burstyn come along for the ride, I did get a little bit excited, I'm not going to lie, because I thought she was the best thing about the original, or one of the biggest positives about the original film. But here, it's just a bit of a short cameo, and it's nothing like Jamie Lee Curtis coming back in Halloween 2018, unfortunately. And you think that might have been the case with David Gordon Green directing. This was very a slow burn movie. Like, I've gone on record to say that I appreciate slow burn horrors these days, but this one really does take its time. I mean, it's more of a snail's pace. It sees 2 girls going missing in the woods, and they come back 3 days later and they're acting very strange because, of course, they are possessed. And this movie just ends up going into the generic demonic possession route in the third act, where it's a movie we see come out every other month. It just has Exorcist in the title and Ellen Burstyn there for a little bit, and they seem to think that that will do for an Exorcist sequel or legacy sequel, but no, it just really does feel like someone has taken an old script and went, oh, this'll do, we'll just put Exorcist in the title and we'll ask Ellen Burstyn to come and we can make this an Exorcist sequel. I don't know what Blumhouse are thinking doing this and trying to make it a trilogy. It's off to a very bad start, especially at the box office and with the reviews. So it's going to be interesting to see how this trilogy does turn out, but I don't hold very high hopes for it at all. Leslie Odom Jr. was probably the best thing about this movie. He wasn't given a ton to work with here, but you can tell the guy's got talent. I kind of got behind him as a character because his daughter's gone missing, and as a father now I can see his struggles there. And I would like to see him in more movies in future because he's done a fine job with what he had to work with. Overall, this movie was just not great at all, and the third act is laughable in some places. Like, I'm not joking, it's laughable. So unfortunately, the Exis Believer was a little bit of a disappointment for me. Next up, we have Pet Sematary Bloodlines, a prequel to the remake that was announced just a few months ago, and then we finally got it, like, within a short period there. And this follows Jug Crandall at the time of the Timmy Bateman story. Now, if you don't know what the Timmy Bateman story is, it's a subplot that Jug Crandall told in the original Pet Sematary about this guy who was killed in the war. His dad brings him home, buries him at the cemetery. He comes back as this like zombified guy or this sinister character, because that's what the cemetery does. It starts to wreak havoc on the town. And that story was told within a couple of minutes in the original Pet Sematary, and it's just elongated here to a 90-minute runtime. And that's the thing, it just feels like a very linear and vanilla prequel. Doesn't do too much. We know the outcome of the story, where it's going to start and where it's going to end, because we've been told it before. There's no risk or anything thrown in. There's nothing from left field apart from a 5-minute little subplot where it tells you the origins of the cemetery, which I appreciated. But overall, this is just a very straight down the road film. The third act is elevated a little bit when Timmy Bateman's going a little bit more sinister. But it's probably the most normal third act that's ever got elevated, if you like. Like, it's just, it goes from here to just here instead of going. I mean, the movie, Jug Crandall, it didn't really feel like Judd. It just felt like this normal guy. Jackson White put an okay performance in, but that's the thing. It's just okay around the board. Apart from the guy who played Timmy Bateman, I thought he was the best thing about the film, but all the other characters, there was no one to get behind. There's no story arcs going on. It was just a very, very normal, watchable, okay movie. That is Pet Sematary Bloodlines. Next up, we have VHS 85, and this was a vast improvement on last year's VHS 99. I had a lot of fun with this one, and this has 5 stories where different things are happening apart from one which does interconnect. The first story, we see like these teenagers having fun at the lake and this sniper starts to attack them. Won't say too much more than that. And the second story, we have this disaster happening and some evil force maybe have something to do with that. And we're following this these are all found footage, by the way. And these characters are trying to get out of this building as this earthquake's happening. Then we have one where we see the very first VR that was invented, and this woman is performing it on stage, but all things start to go wrong, and people are just watching in disarray. And in the fourth story, we follow this family that's a little bit strange, and it links to the first movie, which I thought was the best part of this entire film. I really appreciated that. And then the fifth story, we have these murders taking place, and this guy is sending these videotapes of the murder to the police station before they've even happened. And that had a really good ending to that story, and that could have worked as a fully fledged film. But I felt a little bit dirty after watching this. Like, it was a very sinister movie. It goes with it. There's some violence and mean-spirited scenes in here. And for me, this one was a bit of a surprise. Yeah, so I quite enjoyed this film. Found footage is something I like. It's not for everyone, but for me, this one worked. So that is VHS 85. Next up, we do have Event Horizon. Now, I'd heard a lot of people say that this is like an underappreciated gem from the 90s and stuff. And I first watched this in VHS when I rented it from the video shop. There was a lot of talk about this movie in my school and stuff. And I decided to pick it up on 4K and give it another go. I didn't really like it on VHS when I seen it as a kid. but I couldn't remember a damn thing about it, apart from Sam Neill going a little bit crazy. And that never sat right with me as a kid, because I always liked him in Jurassic Park, and see him as this horrible character in this one just felt weird. But obviously, as an adult now, I can accept that he is an actor and he's got variety. But this one, basically, it does take a lot of inspiration from Alien and Aliens. And then what I mean by that is Alien, it's got the same sort of story. Like, this ship hasn't been seen for years, and then they find out where it is. So this team goes to investigate it. And Aliens, by trying to mimic some of the characters here, like there's a guy who's definitely desperately trying to be Bill Paxton in this movie. Hudson, is it? Yeah, Hudson. And you can just tell with all the jokes he's coming out with and stuff. Sam Neill is kind of like the bear character. But what I do appreciate is the third act. It definitely done its own thing. This movie becomes a little bit of a ghost story and starts to go down a very dark path. It's got a cool little cast in there, you know, Lawrence Fishburne and stuff like that, and lots of British actors that I remember from back in the day, like they were in Dog Soldiers and stuff. And I just don't think that this is the underrated, appreciated gem that everyone says it is. I had an okay time with it. I liked it. But I didn't love it. You know, it's a 3 out of 5 on my letterbox. Now, apparently this was meant to be a much more violent movie than what it was. And you can tell with some of the editing later on that they definitely wanted to go for that, but they had to cut it all out, I believe. And it would be nice to see that version. I don't think we're ever going to see it. But you can tell they wanted to do so much more with this movie and couldn't. Overall, it wasn't bad. That is Event Horizon. Next up, we have Friday the 13th. And I'm going to give this my older pick of the month. Why not? I've seen this movie over 50 times now. It was one of the very first horror movies I watched. And I have up and down times with this, but I'm still going to give it my older pick of the month because it's got such nostalgia attached to it for me. Yeah, well, this movie is just so goofy. I can't believe this movie actually scared the crap out of me back in the day. And this basically just sees a load of the campers going to this camp and being picked off one by one. I'm going to get into spoilers here, guys. If you haven't seen Friday the 13th, this movie is 43 years old. But obviously the killer in this movie is not Jason. Now, if you want to fast forward the video a little bit there, please feel free. But we do have Mrs. Voorhees as the killer here. And I think she's great in the third act when she's just saying, she's sort of talking as Jason, you know, through the third person and stuff. I thought that was all cool. But man, how can she be just this efficient killer and then just get her ass handed to her by Alice so many times? It just baffles me. There's so many cool little kills in here, though, especially the one with Kevin Bacon, where that screw goes through his neck. I struggle to lie on my back because of this movie. I always have done. The one with the axe thrown in the girl's head. I love the character of Ralph. He's just so over the top and cheesy. And the ending of this film has probably got one of the best jump scares ever. However, why didn't the movie just end there? It's so frustrating for me. I done a video ages ago saying 10 scenes I hate in movies I love. I'll try and leave it in the link down below. And this was actually in there. That should have just ended with Jason pulling her off the boat and it's a dream sequence. Why did you do that? There's some really crappy dialogue in here as well, and people just playing strip poker that has nothing to do with the story. But I have a good time with it. I can't help but like Friday the 13th. So that is the original Friday the 13th. Next up, we have Cat's Eye, a Stephen King anthology movie. And this, like anthology movies, some of them are better than others, aren't they? So this follows 3 different stories. The first story of this film was definitely the more interesting one. And by the way, this is all taken from this cat traveling to different locations. That's how we see the stories. But definitely the first story was the best for me. This follows James Woods, who's trying to quit smoking. So he goes to this firm that helps deal with that. And he definitely is going to quit smoking because they've got people following around. And if he makes one wrong move or has one little pull of a cigarette, they're going to do things to his family and stuff. And I thought that was such an interesting, sinister concept. But it can, you know, they are determined to not let him smoke again. So that was a cool concept on how to quit smoking, I suppose. The second one follows like this guy who's dead rich and he's a gambler and he'll gamble on anything, and he gambles on this guy like sort of teasing him, saying, I want you to walk around my balcony, and he lives in this big skyscraper, and he bets that he can't do it and stuff like that. And it was a good little turn on its head later on. The third story was definitely by far the weakest story in this movie for me. It's Drew Barrymore as a young kid, and she wants this cat as her pet, and her parents don't really want her to have it, and there's this little demon going around the house, and they think it's the cat wrecking the house and stuff. So it wasn't bad. It was an okay anthology film. Horror anthologies is something I really do need to watch more of. It's probably my least watched horror subgenre, but it was okay. It was fine. That is Catey. Next up, we have Blood and Betrayal, The Essex Murders. This is a brand new documentary that was kindly sent to me by Signature Entertainment. And I've done a full review for this on the channel. I'll leave it in the link down below if you want to check it out. But this follows this is a documentary about the murder of the Essex boys, who you might have heard from this done the Rise of the Foot Soldier movies and stuff. And they are all new interviews here. We've got the lead detective getting interviewed. We've got Craig Roll's brother coming out of hiding and sort of speaking in this movie about his brother and stuff. You know, there's all new interviews here with people who knew these guys and what really happened. And then it does try and go through a few of the conspiracy theories as well, because lots of people believe the story we were told that didn't happen. It explores all them different avenues. However, I think I've made my mind up now. This documentary definitely helps you get the facts, and you kind of watching it and it's very, very hard to disagree with the point of view it comes across. So it explores all these different ones and then just goes for it one direction in the final half of the documentary, I'd say. You really do have to keep up with this though. There's a lot of names mentioned at the start of the documentary and stuff, and you're just like, okay, so they're linked there's like this little family tree sort of deal going on the screen every few minutes, and you're like, okay, so he's him, he's linked to him. You've really got to keep your focus on it for the first 30 minutes there. But I thought this was very interesting. And as someone who loves the Rise of the Foot Soldier movies, who's took a slight interest in this case over the years, I'm glad to have finally watched this and definitely have made my mind up now. So that is Blood and Betrayal, The Essex Murders. Next up, we have Haunted Mansion that came to Disney+. Missed this one at the cinema, and it's a very, you know what, the more I think about it, the more I just really didn't like this movie all that much. It has a few good things going for it. It's fun enough. It's watchable enough. But it just suffers from a lot of stuff that Disney just seems to throw out there. Like, it feels generic. You know, it doesn't feel like it's doing anything special. Like, Lakeith Stanfield? Oh, I forgot the guy's name. Is it Lakeith Stanfield? I hope it's that. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. He is hired to go and take some pictures with the special camera he's got around this house that's haunted, where this mother and her son have moved in. And he doesn't believe all that. He kind of fakes it, and then he sort of gets this ghost force that follows him home, and then he starts to believe that this house is actually haunted. You've got Danny DeVito in there, who's always fun, I suppose. I just wasn't feeling this movie too much. It's very long. It's 2 hours. Like, 2 hours isn't long, but it is when you're not having... It's not a movie you're fully invested in, let's put it that way. It didn't need to be that. It could have been 90 minutes. I didn't love this movie. It is what it is. That is Haunted Mansion. Next up, we have Three from Hell. Now, that is very fitting for the shirt I've got on there. This is the third movie, but after House of a Thousand Corpses and The Devil's Rejects, and this was actually a first time watch for me. I've owned this for a while now, and I don't know why it's took me this long to get round to this, because I love the first two films. And this follows the Firefly family breaking out of jail and going on another murderous rampage. There is some really horrible scenes in this movie, like really gritty, grindhouse, dirty violence in this film. Like, these characters are just horrible people. So you got Otis there and Baby, and Otis's brother, played by, I should really know his name. He's a massive name in horror. Bill Moseley. No, it's not Bill Moseley. Sorry, it's not. Bill Moseley is Otis. Sorry, Richard Brake, who you will know from Barbarian. But yeah, it's got these three, and then just going on a big rampage. Now, this movie really was working for me for the first hour, and I liked what it was doing, even though it was a horrible film, with the violence and stuff like that, and very unfair what they do to people in this movie and stuff. It's the same for the other two films. In the second half, though, they go to Mexico, and the movie came down a little bit for me. It just went a bit OTT, really, and I just wasn't feeling it as much. But this movie, it wasn't bad. It's probably the weakest in the trilogy, but I still had a good time with it. And it was good to get back with these characters again. Sherry Moon Zombie is a actress who I think gets a lot of flack. I love her in the first two films, but she's definitely at her most annoying in this one. So I hope she's not losing that ability she had to not really get on my nerves like everyone else. But in this movie, she did a little bit. So that is Three from Hell. And I'm going to say it now. I kind of love all the Rob Zombie movies I've watched. I can't wait to watch the other ones. There's a couple I'm missing. So that is Three from Hell. Next up, we have When Evil Lurks, which I'd heard a lot about. And when it came to Shudder, I watched it instantly. This is a demonic possession movie that does its own thing, really. It's not your generic demonic possession movie like The Exorcist Believer. This these people around the world who can be possessed, and people know about it, but it's one every blue moon, and they send these people called fixers, I believe, to deal with these people. However, the fixer who is on his way to kill this demonic, this possessed person is killed on the way there. So these two characters think, look, we've got to get rid of this possessed person, but if they kill it, it will spread. So they decide to just drop it like 3 miles out of town, and that is the worst thing they could have done. And this town starts to be taken over by evil, basically. Now, I don't want to say too much more than that, because you're definitely better going into this movie blind, but there's some real what the fuck moments in here. You feel danger is around every corner. There are some really violent and dark scenes in this movie, especially when one character later on is walking along the road with something in her hand, and I don't want to say too much, but the look on the character's face who sees her do this is horrifying, and I was like, oh, great acting there. The last 10 minutes, I wish it would have played out a little bit better, but this movie is something totally different. It's an interesting spin on demonic possession subgenre. It works. There was some moments where I wish characters would have made better decisions. They know what's going to happen if they take this step, and they take it anyway. And it's like, you're taking me out the movie a little bit there, because if I was in that situation, there's no way I'd do that. But overall, and very interesting horror movie that you should absolutely check out. It is subtitles. I think it's an Argentinian movie. That doesn't bother me anyway. But if you're a horror fan, definitely check this out for something different. Next up, we have my new release of the month, Martin Scorsese's Killer of the Flower Moon. Now, me and my friend Jamie went to the cinema in the daytime, on a Saturday daytime, to watch this, and it is 3.5 hours long. Definitely the longest I have ever sat down in a cinema for a movie, but it was worth it. Now, don't get me wrong, this movie does move. I wouldn't say it's a slow pace, but it takes its time, and it is a little bit of an endurance test. I think any movie that's 3.5 hours long would test your patience a little bit. Well, I wouldn't say I was ever bored. I wasn't hating being there or anything like that, but you do feel it. It's 3.5 hours long at the end of the day. That is a long time. 3 hours is bad enough. 3.5 is a long time. But I'm glad I've seen this movie now. This follows Leonardo DiCaprio, who's come back from the war to stay with his uncle, Robert De Niro, and he takes an interest in this girl who's part of the Osage Nation, who own the lands around there and are very, very wealthy. And Robert De Niro starts to hatch a little bit of a plan. Well, he's been doing this for years anyway, to kind of make money, and he uses Leonardo DiCaprio to sort of help him get there. Now, there's some very evil things going on here in this movie with humans, and how humans are just the worst pieces of garbage on the planet. How they can just make decisions on other humans and not even care. I couldn't believe this was a true story. Like, it really got under my skin when I heard that. Uh, it just really does baffle the mind that people can be so horrible. Now, this movie really did tell a cool little crime story for the 2 hours, and then it really does pick up for the last hour, hour and a half when the FBI start to get involved and everything, and definitely carries that last hour and a half at a much faster pace, if you like. So if you kind of feeling a little bit, the last hour and a half moves a little bit quicker. Great performances in here. Robert De Niro is just, again, knocking it out the park. Him and Scorsese is just like peanut butter and jelly, isn't it? I mean, they just go together perfectly. And he is just throwing another awesome performance in here. Leonardo DiCaprio, as always, is great. There's just great performances all around. This movie is exceptional. I don't think it's one of Scorsese's best. I mean, obviously, look, it is one of it. It's probably in his top 10 and stuff. I wouldn't have it in like next to Taxi Driver and stuff like that. But it's a very, very good film. I think he's done a masterful job here. He's a master of his craft. It's worth watching. But if you're not feeling that long runtime, definitely just check it out when it comes to Apple TV. But for me, this movie was a class act. That is Flowers, Killers of the Flower Moon. And last up, we do have Dark Harvest. Not gonna lie, guys, I wasn't really a big fan of this, and I thought I would be. This has a very cool concept, and it's based on a novel about this evil demon, sort of scarecrow type looking thing that comes from the cornfields and wreaks havoc on this town every Halloween. And it's up to the young boys who are in high school and stuff to take this thing down. Girls aren't allowed to participate before it reaches its destination of this church and wreaks havoc on the town all year round. And each boy wants to kind of take this thing down and become the hero for that year. And it follows the main protagonist whose brother won it the year before, and he wants to show his parents that he can do it as well. He's got something to offer to the family, and he just sets out and he says he's gonna do it. My huge problem with this film is that every character was virtually unlikable. I didn't really like anyone in this movie. The townsfolk are horrible to one another. People are just being assholes and inflicting violence on others to try and be number one, to take this thing down. And I just couldn't get behind anyone. I didn't even want the town to be saved in the end. The CGI looking monster for CGI wasn't bad. I'm not a fan of CGI, but it kind of worked for this movie. There was some cool little kills in there. But this movie just tries one too many things and becomes very, very overcomplicated. It's way over ambitious for its own good. And in the end, I was like, why is this happening? Okay, that doesn't make sense, but I just didn't care, put it that way. So yeah, Dark Harvest, not a great movie, unfortunately. Okay guys, I hope you all enjoyed this end of month vlog. Sorry it's a little bit late, but what did you think of these movies? Do let me know in the comments down below. Please give this video a like and subscribe if this is your sort of thing. Thanks so much everyone, take it all easy, and I'll see you all in the next video.